and welcome to Grimwit with Dimwits. I'm Blondie.
And I'm T.
And we are so excited to be back.
Yes, we are. We're excited every week for some strange reason.
Because hopefully we're entertaining you.
Yeah, and if nothing else, we entertain each other. So I just wanted to let everybody know this is our third episode that we're recording today, and it has been a long night.
I think she's asking for grace in advance.
Yes, I am, because it's a great story, and I don't want to shortchange it, but it has been a really long day and a long night looking at Blondie.
How lucky can you be?
Yeah, let's go with that.
There's a line. There is a line.
It's a very thin line at this point, but it's a line we have to endure.
Well, I think because you came out, it gives us an opportunity to spend some time together.
Yes, it does. And doing this podcast, we spend a lot of time together.
Yeah, I know.
The tone says it all. Remember how we used to miss each other? Not so much anymore.
Yeah, times have changed. So what's going on this episode?
So this story is diver's worst nightmare. I'm not a diver, but I'm going to probably safely assume that this would be at least one of a diver's worst nightmares. So I say in the description, it's a diver's worst nightmare to be miles from shore enjoying the ocean, scuba diving a beautiful reef 1 minute, and then resurfacing only to find your charter boat is nowhere in sight. You frantically call for help, but you are unmistakably all alone, abandoned in the deep blue sea. There is nowhere to go and nothing to hold on to, including hope. Slowly, the realization hits as you and your partner begin to literally sink into the darkness.
Ooh. Now, when you said your worst nightmare and diving, I honestly was thinking being stuck at the bottom of the ocean with no air. I mean, I know I'm probably jumping ahead, but that would seriously be one of my worst nightmares.
Yeah, that's not a good one.
Don't you know somebody that's a diver?
I do actually know somebody that's a diver. You actually know him as well. It's my brother, and he is really into diving.
We should have had him interview with us. This would be an interesting question for him to answer.
Oh, any opportunity to get my brother here, right?
Shush, let's not go down that road.
I think my brother actually has a lot of nightmares, so we may not want to get into all that. He's going to be so mad if he hears this podcast.
Well, he's got you as a sister. I think that would be nightmare number one.
Yeah, exactly. That's probably his scariest nightmare.
You know what, though? Isn't it all of ours? Don't let her kid you. It's all of ours.
I'm sure there's a long line of people. This story is really tragic, though. And it's really tragic because this whole situation was completely avoidable. The details are just heartbreaking. They really are. Thomas Joseph Lonergan was born on December 28, 1964, and Eileen Cassidy Lonergan was born on March 3, 1969. They were married on June 24, 1988, in Jefferson, Texas, and they were both graduates of Louisiana State University. They ended up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and were a young, fun-loving couple who were living their best lives and checking things off their bucket lists left and right. They both were quite adventurous, loved to travel, and as veteran scuba divers, many of their vacations focused around new sites to explore for optimal scuba adventures. They married quite young.
They did, and it sounds like they really had their act together fast. I mean, taking things off your bucket list is not a cheap thing.
In your 20s, I mean, he was, I think, 30 when all of this happened. She was still in her 20s. So they're kind of a go-getter couple.
Mm-hmm.
So kudos to them. The couple were also devout Catholics, and they had joined the Peace Corps in the early 1990s. And at the time of the accident, they had recently completed a 2-year tour of duty teaching underprivileged children at Funafuti Atoll in the small South Pacific island nation of Tuvalu. and repeating that work on the beautiful islands of Fiji.
Okay, first of all, so they married young. They're doing all the things on their bucket list, and they're doing wonderful work on top of that. They're starting out to be pretty great people.
Right.
Also, on a side note, I can't believe you said all those names so well.
We've been to Fiji.
Yes, we have.
Bula. So you should be spitting these out left and right.
I am spitting. It's just not what's coming out. And don't you have Bula somewhere?
I do. I have it tattooed on the back of my neck. It was a great trip. I always wanted to remember it.
And Bula means?
Bula is like their version of aloha.
Oh, nice.
It means greetings all day.
So you have to, because it's on your back, you have to say Bula coming, and they can just look at your back.
That's
going,
right. And then I flip over. See ya. I don't think anybody gets it, though.
No.
With all their good intentions, though, both of them, however, ended up hating their jobs. Tom, who kept a detailed journal and made entries every day, wrote that he had, quote, had enough of casting pearls before swine, end quote, which means to offer someone something excessively valuable and it is not appreciated. I actually had to look that up. I thought I knew what it meant, but I wanted to be sure. And his wife recorded in her journal that she didn't like her students and hated teaching.
Wow. Teachers, don't they just usually love their jobs?
Yeah, you either love it or you don't. But this is kind of surprising that they both ended up not loving what they signed up to do. And I know these are their personal diaries with their personal thoughts. I'm trying not to be too judgy, but that does seem kind of rough. If you truly hate your job so much, why not just do something else? I'm sure they could have found something with their educations and degrees.
And again, they are very young.
They are very young. That may have had something to do with it.
Absolutely.
And they have their whole lives ahead of them. Spending 2 years doing something you don't love, you're not only punishing yourself, but you're probably punishing those around you as well.
Very true.
So I'm not coming down on them. I'm just saying it's surprising with the way that they're such go-getters that they compromised and settled for this.
Yeah, no, I get it.
So after fulfilling their Peace Corps contract, they decided to take a break, go on holiday, and get some scuba diving in prior to heading to the islands of Hawaii, where they hope to start fresh and settle down.
Someplace we've been also.
A few times.
Quite a few times.
You've been there so many times, you should be an honorary Hawaiian citizen at this point.
I do still have my coconut bra on my hula skirt.
Ugh, erase that visual now. Sorry, guys.
Hey, don't be a hater.
Didn't mean to do that to y'all. This isn't supposed to be that scary of a story.
This is the part where we just can't wrap our skulls around. That's this part.
Yes.
Interject.
Can't wrap your coconut bra around.
No, we cannot anymore.
The couple chose to spend some time in Australia diving the Great Barrier Reef. I really wanted to see the Great Barrier Reef.
I did too.
But after arriving in Australia, people who met the couple where they were staying in Port Douglas remembered them fondly as two smiling young Americans who came to Australia specifically to dive the St. Crispin Reef, which is a coral reef nicknamed the Flower Garden and known to be home to beautiful plant life, reef sharks, and bumphead parrotfish. It's a very popular diving and snorkeling spot for expeditions from Port Douglas and Cairns. In fact, when weather issues began in the area, the Lonergans waited a full 10 days until the weather conditions were perfect for their dive. They truly wanted it to be a splendid experience.
Man, they really do enjoy their diving.
Right? I mean, you can see that they're kind of seeking perfection. So this must have been like their personal escape, and they just wanted it to be great.
It sounds like it. And do we need to say anything about bumphead parrotfish?
I kind of think I know what fish they're talking about just by the way it's described. But yeah, that's a pretty cool name. So this is what presumably happened to Tom and Eileen Lonergan on January 25th, 1998 at St. Crispin's Reef, located on the Great Barrier Reef, 25 miles off the coast of Queensland, Australia. The Lonergans boarded for a day of diving at Port Douglas, Queensland's based scuba boat named the MV Outer Edge. On the boat, they went out to a couple of sites prior to this last dive. So they had dove twice before this last dive.
Okay.
And Tom and Eileen successfully accomplished those dives. So when they made it to the last dive spot, they were given permission to dive on their own, together without a dive master. Normally, everyone would have been required to dive with a dive master, but since they were obviously veteran divers, they were allowed to venture out by themselves.
Well, that's kind of cool.
It is cool. Well,
so far it's cool.
I'm sure it sounded cool at the time. I didn't look it up, but I'm going to guess a dive master goes out and probably keeps the group together so no one ventures off.
And don't they also check their air and all of their equipment and everything like that to make sure everything is okay?
I didn't look it up, but that sounds right. It's almost like someone should be supervising them, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And since they were avid divers, they were allowed to go off by themselves. So I can only imagine what they experienced there. Schools of plentiful and colorful fish, possibly some reef sharks, and the beautiful intricate coral reef. They must have been having the time of their lives because they were late coming back to the group to return to shore. But this had also happened on the 2 previous dives. But obviously they made it back to their boat on time.
So this is the 3rd time they were late going back?
Yes.
You may not know this, but was it the same group that they were with?
Yes, the group was doing 3 dives that day, and this was the last dive. So they had been diving together all day.
Okay.
But when they finally resurfaced, missing the scheduled time, the boat is not there. How can it not be there? How could it have possibly left them? They're supposed to count all the passengers following each dive, and they've been doing that, so this makes no sense because obviously they're not on the boat. There's confusion and disbelief. Why did the boat leave and abandon them? They remain floating on the surface with their minds reeling as they are abandoned to their fate. Following the confusion, there's sure to be moments of hope, anger, and hopelessness, and then fear. Within hours, the sharks begin to circle and the reality of their situation appears certain. Now, what happened in the water after they resurfaced is what I'm guessing most people would imagine. But of course, nobody knows what really happened.
I can't believe they left them after diving with them all day for the 3rd time that day.
I know, exactly. And when you get some more of these details, it's even going to be more unbelievable. Stories from fellow divers and the crew members vary. But at the end of the day, the crew conducted a head count of passengers on board the vessel and came up with only 24 of their 26 recorded passengers. So they did realize for a moment. But other divers on board pointed out that 2 people had jumped back into the ocean to swim off the bow, and the crew, assuming that they had missed those 2, adjusted the passenger count to 26. And when the swimmers were back on board the boat, the Outer Edge headed back to the mainland as scheduled. Now, I've been on several of these types of boat excursions myself, and I'm not sure if this is even reasonable, but I'm having difficulty with nobody noticing that this pair was missing, especially after already doing a couple of dives all together, like we were talking about before.
Right.
You see faces and sort of get to chatting with people naturally, even if it's just while you're waiting in front of the minimal amount of bathrooms on these boats. I completely get that it's not the guest's responsibility, so I'm not blaming the guest. But the boat is such a confined space that you can't help but notice people after spending the day together, either on the boat or even in the ocean. Maybe I'm just naturally aware of my surroundings and some of the people in it, but it does seem strange with 24 other people, nobody noticed this couple was not there.
I've been on these boats as well, and you're right. they're not that big. And before you drive away, you have to make sure, you just don't assume, you make sure that you have all of your passengers.
Right. That does seem sloppy that they let passengers on the boat say, oh, those are the two people you are looking for, rather than confirming it themselves.
Right.
It's very sloppy. Even more confusing is if they gave them special permission to go off by themselves, how come nobody remembered that? How come nobody thought about, well, what about those two we let dive by themselves? How do you not remember that? But see, by somebody else saying that two people had jumped into the water, they assumed it was those two. But again, even the crew spent the whole day with these people, and if you specifically talk to a couple, because they're the veteran divers, and it doesn't sound like anyone else was allowed to go by themselves, isn't that going to stay in your mind for a moment? Aren't you going to go, oh, wait, what about those two?
I would. And I can't believe that they're just letting the other passengers make the call.
Exactly.
So to speak, make the call.
Exactly. That's what I was saying. That is super sloppy. And, I know they didn't expect this to happen, but there needs to be some checks and balances here.
Right. No, I agree. I fully agree.
I mean, because I would have been like, I don't know their names, but I specifically remember telling them they could go off by themselves. Where are they? If you're the one person that told them that, it should stick out in your mind.
Right. Especially if the head count originally came up short.
Yeah, the whole thing is just
kind of hinky.
Very hinky. Upon returning to the mainland, the passengers disembarked, taking all of their belongings with them. Obviously, the Lonergans' belongings were not claimed, and the two dive tanks that the Lonergans rented that belonged to the outer edge were also not on board, and still nobody noticed.
Oh my gosh.
You would think that even if it was just to ensure that all of their equipment was properly returned, the business would have some type of equipment count mandated at the end of each excursion. That alone would have sounded the alarm. How do you not check for your own stuff? Even if you're not thinking you might have left people behind, how do you not make sure that people didn't, run off with your tanks for some reason or leave them in the ocean?
And plus, all the passengers, the Lonergan stuff was still on board.
Exactly. And here's an explanation for that. It wasn't until 2 days later, Jeffrey, also known as Jack Nairn, the boat's skipper, discovered Eileen and Tom's personal belongings in the lost property bin on the outer edge. When the bags were investigated, they found Tom's wallet, his glasses, and clothing. They also found items belonging to Eileen. Following this, it was realized that the two dive tanks checked out by the Lonergans were also never returned. They don't even know about their own stuff for 2 days? And I would like to know who picked up the unclaimed bags and put them in the lost property bin without questioning how somebody could have left their wallet and their glasses.
I think it would be the crew, because don't they have to clean up the boat afterwards to get it ready for the next excursion?
Yeah, obviously. So which crew member picked it up and went, this isn't weird, and stuck it in the lost and found bin?
It's not like it's a tiny little bag. I would imagine that they were decent sized bags. It's not just like they threw a shirt in there or something and left.
Right, something that might have looked slightly empty. I mean, there were glasses, a wallet, personal belongings, probably a big bottle of suntan lotion. It wasn't just like a little lunch bag, it was a bag. It's just so many people not taking responsibility for anything that stood out of the ordinary that day. And if one person had, these people would still be around, and we wouldn't be telling this story right now.
All it would have taken was that one person to just be aware of what was going on around them.
And they could have went back and hopefully picked them up, and life would have went on. But that's not how this goes. The skipper was shocked and immediately concerned, so he called the owner of the hotel listed as where the couple had been staying, the Gone Walkabout Hostel in Cairns, to see if they had returned. After speaking with the owner, he was told that nobody had seen the couple for a few days. It then became very clear at this point that the couple had been unintentionally abandoned at sea.
Irresponsibly abandoned at sea.
I can't even imagine what this guy was thinking. He probably saw his life flash before his eyes. There goes everything right there. I have really majorly screwed up.
As it should.
Exactly as it should have. Authorities were notified and a massive air and sea search took place for 3 days, with Navy and civilian vessels searching far and wide for the Lonergans. Unfortunately, even with this massive effort, no trace of Eileen or Tom turned up. After more than 48 hours in the ocean, it was surmised that the couple may have drowned or been eaten by sharks. But as details of the chilling story broke, other theories began to emerge.
That sounds kind of ominous.
It's a stretch, let's put it that way. One theory is that they committed suicide, or a murder-suicide took place. Their journals were discovered in their hotel room and hinted at personal troubles. Speculation that the couple may have planned their suicide started after notes were found by police in the Lonergans' hotel room, which were said to have indicated that there had been, quote, personal trauma, end quote.
Personal trauma equates to suicide?
I guess so. We all have personal trauma. Some people have personal trauma every single day.
Some have it every single minute doing this podcast.
I'm having some right now. But relatives have angrily discounted this story. They have denied suggestions that the couple had marital problems or that Tom was depressed about his job prospects. Tom's mother, Elizabeth, said, "I will tell you exactly what the story is. They were left behind. All this talk about them wanting to disappear is just a bunch of garbage. Somebody left them in the water, and they did not report it for 2.5 days." And you know what? She's absolutely right about that. As a mother, I would be livid if people started tearing my kid apart, I don't care how old he is, to justify their unfathomable mistakes.
I'm almost pissed.
That's right. Oof, don't get me going. Another scenario has the Lonergans using the dive boat as part of an elaborate hoax to fake their own deaths. This makes no sense. There's no way they would have known that the boat would not account for them returning. Most boats would have noticed and made sure they got back on board. That was really just a fluke and could not have been planned.
Especially after they've dived twice already that day. And both those times they were already late. You'd think that they would still be picked up. They already knew that the couple does that.
Yeah, you're right. They had already run late the 2 previous dives, so they should have actually been looking out for that.
Exactly.
I know we're making a lot of assumptions that people do what they're supposed to do or take note of things that they're supposed to take note of, and obviously that didn't happen. As far as faking their deaths, how could they possibly know there would be a miscount and the boat would leave? That's ridiculous. It's like, give me something I can work with here, people. That's definitely not it.
That is not it.
Jeanette Brenthal, owner of a bookshop in Port Douglas, believes the couple came into her store on January 27th, 2 days after they went missing from their dive trip, and they were book browsing. The pair was also reportedly sighted at a hotel in downtown Darwin, which is over 2,700 kilometers away. That's about a 30-hour car ride. Yeah, but without their glasses, without their wallets.
Right.
That doesn't make any sense. Reports of a boat less than a mile from St. Crispin's Reef seem to support theories that the couple was picked up. But the Lonergans' bank accounts were never touched, and no one ever collected on their $45,000 insurance policies. So it wasn't an insurance scam or anything, and $45,000 isn't worth an insurance scam. So that's even more ridiculous. Questions were also raised over why the couple had apparently ignored a large life buoy nearby that was easily visible from the water. Although Tom wore glasses and had poor eyesight, his wife's eyesight was fine. But how does anyone know if they didn't try that and got swept away with the current? Or maybe one of them had already been injured and unable to make the swim. How can anybody say anything for sure? This is just all speculation, and some of these theories are really ridiculous.
This whole thing is actually completely ridiculous. Es muy loco.
The presence of an unidentified fishing boat was observed roaring away from the dive site on the afternoon of the disappearance, and more than 20 sightings of the Lonergans were reported for months after the incident. In the country pubs of northern Queensland, even alien abduction has not been ruled out as an explanation of the Lonergans' whereabouts. Such fantasies are, of course, dismissed by rational observers of the case, but the gossip persists nonetheless. We must be the rational observers, because I'm definitely dismissing all this nonsense.
This is all just a bunch of hooey.
While the police seem to believe the couple probably drowned or were eaten by sharks, more elaborate theories continue to proliferate. Police did not want to waste valuable time investigating possible links between this case and another fellow American, Milton Harris, who attempted to fake his own suicide by jumping off a car ferry into the sea in South Australia in 1985. But when a rescuer dived in to save him, he found Harris, who had a $3 million life insurance policy, sitting on the seabed, breathing from a concealed aqualung air bottle. But later, Harris disappeared once again off a New Zealand ferry and was pronounced dead. His wife collected on the insurance, and he was caught 4 years later in Auckland under the name Bill Travis with a new wife and new baby.
So this man tried this twice?
Yep. And the second time, I guess they believed him and paid out the insurance policy.
So his wife got the insurance policy and he got a new wife and a baby?
I guess so. There must have been a behind-the-scenes plan. Otherwise, why would he have been so desperate to do this? He must have gotten a portion of that money. It's ridiculous. It's too crazy. Detective Colin McCallum said that despite the fact that all three people came from, and here's the coincidence, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, there was nothing to link the two incidents, and he dismissed the idea that the Lonergans somehow faked their own suicides following in Harris's steps as nonsense. But few people in Port Douglas, and certainly not those who know the Barrier Reef, were happy with the official version of events surrounding the Lonergans' disappearance. The authorities initially claimed that the couple had drowned or were eaten by tiger sharks. Diving experts say that the couple could have easily swam to a well-frequented pontoon and waited to be picked up by rescuers.
So I have a question. They did air search, they did water search or sea search. They found absolutely nothing. I think if a shark is going to, I don't know, I'm not a shark expert, but if they're going to eat a person, they're not going to eat the tanks. So why wouldn't they be on the bottom of the ocean?
We're going to go through some of the stuff that happened following this. But yes, at that time, they found nothing. Okay?
Okay.
Graham Connett, a local veteran diver, said there was a Quicksilver dive site, a brightly lit permanent platform in the ocean used by divers that is only 2.7 nautical miles from the Lonergans dive site. It was in the area if they wanted to go there. There were also 3 or 4 boats in the area and the dive platform, and on that day the Lonergans had at least 5 hours of light available. There is no doubt that they could have reached one of those rescue options because conditions were excellent.
2.7 nautical miles away, that's assuming they knew it was there.
Exactly.
And they're not going to, 2.7 miles, if you're bobbing up and down in the water, you're not going to see that. The assumptions these people make are just ludicrous.
They really are. The waves, they're big sometimes. You know, yeah, they go down and they go up, but every time it goes down is the only time you can see, and then it goes up and you lose your direction and whatever you were looking at before. It's easy to do. I mean, I can't imagine somebody thinking, well, they should have known, you know.
Well, you should have not left them.
It's very condescending. It's ridiculous. It's their fault somehow. Mr. Connett, this is the same guy, does not believe that the Lonergans were hunted down by tiger sharks either. saying that such sharks do not inhabit the waters around the St. Crispin Reef. The sharks that surround the reef are docile, not man-eaters. And if they were attacked by sharks, why wasn't their clothing shredded and bloodied? That's a good question. I wondered that myself, as far as at least their vests with no bite marks. Most people wouldn't shed any protective layers in that situation, not only to protect themselves from animals, but I'm sure it was very cold in that water.
Mm-hmm.
Like others, Mr. Connett says that it seems strange that so much of the Lonergan's personal equipment, diving vest, weights, weight belt, and 2 cameras were now recovered from the sea, but with no trace of their bodies. Also recovered was a weather diver's slate, a device used for communicating underwater, that reportedly read, Monday, January 26, 1998, 8:08 a.m. To anyone who can help us, we have been abandoned on Argoncourt Reef by MV Outer Edge on January 25th, 1998, 3 p.m. Please help to rescue us before we die. Help, with 3 exclamation points.
So all their theories are...
They were out there for at least a day, because this is the following day that he's used that, Monday, January 26th. This is the following day after they were abandoned.
Mm-hmm.
But the mystery deepened in February 1998. This is just a month later. A woman's wetsuit matching Eileen Lonergan's size and description washed ashore in North Queensland. Upon examination of barnacle growth on the wetsuit, it was determined it had likely been submerged in the ocean since January, which is right in line with their disappearance. The wetsuit also bore tears along the buttocks and armpit areas, presumed by examiners to have resulted from contact with coral. There were no shark bites on any of it. Not to be gruesome, but how would it have been taken off of her body, and why? Again, I can't imagine her shedding protective layers. Some proof of the body, possibly in a deteriorated state, should have been in or on the wetsuit. And I don't know much about this stuff, but that's what seems logical to me.
I've been in a wetsuit and they don't come off easy.
I know that for a fact.
And if you've just got a tear in your buttocks and your armpit area...
How are your armpits going to go across the corals? I mean, I guess you could have your arms open and be swimming, but...
Yeah, if you...
It's a very delicate area.
You could have coral reefs that are higher, and you're swimming lower, and you do that.
I guess that makes a little... I mean, the buttocks, I couldn't imagine, that seems a little bit easier to justify. But I don't know, the armpits, for whatever reason, it just wasn't making sense to me.
Without shark bites on them, I still have a hard time believing that they just were floating around. How do you get it off?
Yeah. Well, and there's another theory in here coming up. 6 months after the disappearance in June of 1998, more of the couple's diving gear was found washed ashore on a Port Douglas beach approximately 75 miles from where the Lonergans were lost. Among these items were inflatable dive jackets marked with the Lonergans' names, their compressed air tanks, and one of Eileen's fins. Back in Baton Rouge, Eileen's father, John Haynes, suspected that the couple ultimately became dehydrated and disoriented and succumbed to drowning or possibly sharks. During the inquest, experts speculated that based on the state of the equipment recovered, the couple had likely not experienced any animal attacks, but rather succumbed to delirium, resulting from dehydration, which caused them to voluntarily remove their diving outfits. And without the buoyancy provided by their gear, experts testified that the couple would have been unable to tread water for very long and would have soon drowned.
This is all just speculation.
It really is. And I guess there's a few ways that might make sense for what could have happened, but nobody really knows. Mm-hmm. Nobody knows what happened at all. He believes that the couple drowned solely due to being accidentally left behind. Quote, the Australian dive industry wanted to prove that Tom and Eileen faked their death, but the survival rate of being in the ocean with no place to go is nil, end quote, he says of the disappearance theories. The coroner dismissed suggestions that the Lonergans had died by suicide or faked their own disappearances and formally charged Jeffrey Jack Nairn, the skipper of the dive boat, with manslaughter. At an inquest later that year, Graham Houston, counsel for the operators of the Outer Edge, drew gasps from the gallery when he suggested the concept of a double suicide, or even the possibility that Mr. Lonergan murdered his wife before ending his own life. So yes, you get abandoned at sea and all of a sudden you're this murderous maniac?
And I want to know why it wasn't part of or all of the crew also charged.
Well, we're going to talk about that.
Do I keep going ahead?
You keep going ahead. Yeah, just stop. Excerpts from Tom Lonergan's personal journal were found, and they described a man who was looking for a quick and peaceful death. This part is interesting. Eileen's writings expressed that she had chosen to stay with Tom no matter the outcome. What does no matter the outcome mean? You could go in a lot of different directions with that statement.
And why is he talking about death? But I mean, honestly, doesn't everybody want a quick and peaceful death? I mean, that could mean in the future. But you're right. What is no matter what outcome mean?
Let's continue, smarty pants.
I'm going to stop talking.
Please. Can we do this past this podcast? However, the journal entries were taken out of context, according to Eileen's parents and family members. The family, the coroner, Noel Noonan, and the Port Douglas police claimed that only the pages that would validate the suicide theory were leaked to the press, whereas the majority of the diaries remain unread except by the coroner, Port Douglas police, and the Haynes family, her parents. I'm sure reading those diaries were very helpful in giving a big picture of the couple's lives at that time. On August 3rd, I like how you're being quiet. You looked at me like you wanted to talk, and then you were like, nope.
Not doing it.
I'm not doing it. I'm going to stop myself.
I don't want to be scolded.
On August 3rd, 1997, less than 6 months before the fateful trip on the Outer Edge, again, this part, interesting, okay? Mr. Lonergan wrote an entry in his journal that read, quote, like a student who has finished an exam, I feel that my life is complete and I am ready to die. As far as I can tell, from here, my life can only get worse. It has peaked and it's all downhill from here until my funeral. End quote.
Wow.
Yeah. He's certainly giving them something to think about with that quote.
It does sound like he's ready to go.
Yeah, it does. The entry was not in character with the rest of his journal. That's interesting. So they almost make it sound like it not being in character, that he didn't write it.
Somebody else put it in there.
Exactly. That's what it sounds like to me.
And I wonder if, well, no, they did have the journals because they had them from the hotel room.
Right.
So the police, whoever.
The police got to the journal first, I'm assuming. But.
And that's right there is a conspiracy theory.
Yeah. That's at least how they're making that sound, by saying it's not in character. And it is a pretty deep and dark statement. I can see why it could be interpreted as wanting to commit suicide. I mean, he pretty much says it.
Mm-hmm.
It was discovered that Tom had been seemingly depressed because he also wrote of how upset his mother had been with him for turning his back on his Catholic faith and eloping with Eileen. On January 9th, 1998, just 2 weeks before their diving trip, Eileen had written a particularly alarming entry as well. Quote, Tom hopes to die a quick and painless death, and he hopes it happens soon. Tom is not suicidal, but he's got a death wish that could lead him to what he desires, and I could get caught up in that. End quote.
So was that just another page taken out like before, or was that actually?
This is her.
I know.
He said what he said. Now she's confirming those feelings, and sounds like she's a little worried about herself in the process.
It does sound like that.
Yeah, it's a lot. I mean, for people, if they're not thinking about it, writing it down in this manner is certainly giving people a lot to think about as far as whether they were or were not suicidal.
Yeah, it does sound like it. And it is very scary, actually.
It's very concerning. She also wrote of how the relationship with Tom had entered a new and unhealthy phase. Quote, our lives are so entwined now, and we hardly are two individuals. I am still Eileen, but I am mostly Eileen and Tom. He is mostly Tom and Eileen. Where we are now goes beyond dependence, beyond love. End quote. Yeah, these are some very compelling things to write down. It's like, wow.
It almost sounds a little cultish.
Yeah, it's something to think about. They both just sound super on the edge. You know what I mean? Like they're done with this life.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
So where do they go? The outer edge.
Oh, aren't you funny?
It was there.
Since there is no disputing that the crew of the outer edge did miscalculate the number of divers back on board before setting off and accidentally leaving the Lonergans behind, any suicidal plans by the Lonergans would have to rely on an unforeseen and genuine mistake. To most minds, such a coincidence would seem extremely unlikely. Agreed. What are the chances?
100%. 100%.
Exactly. They couldn't have planned that better if they planned it, even though they didn't. Mm-hmm. It's too much. It's too many details.
Well, and if they were the crew was doing their job, they wouldn't have been left.
And other people got involved, and the crew. Yeah, exactly. Too many hands that needed to be involved there for all of that to come together perfectly,
right?
And for it to look like an accident. In November 1999, Jeffrey Nairn, the skipper, was tried on manslaughter charges and acquitted. He felt that he shouldn't have been blamed for a mistake made by the entire crew. He and his company, Outer Edge Dive, was tried by a civil court in Queensland. He pled guilty to negligence and was given a fine. I would love to know what the fine would be for essentially leaving two people to die. Not that he did it on purpose, but that was the outcome. But it was negligent for sure.
Negligent and irresponsible.
Very much.
And you
so.
can make mistakes that don't involve killing people.
Exactly. Yeah, their job is too vital, too important to make mistakes. It'd be like a surgeon just, I had a bad day. That's not how that goes.
Yeah, no.
You got to be a little extra careful. Nairn, the skipper, who closed down Outer Edge Dive shortly thereafter, believes that the Lonergans died on the reef. Quote, it was a tragedy and I'll never get over it. The highest probability is that Tom and Eileen are dead, said Nairn. Queensland government also introduced including the requirement that captains and dive masters must also independently confirm the passenger head count. The couple's disappearance and presumed deaths resulted in a crisis of confidence in the North Queensland's dive industry. The Queensland's government, fearful of the damage to the state's lucrative underwater tourism industry, was anxious to wrap up the Lonergan case and prosecute those responsible for their unfortunate demise. The only good thing to come from this was that the incident resulted in tighter mandatory safety regulations for diving boats in Australia, but the mystery surrounding Tom and Eileen Lonergan seems likely to continue. Their disappearance also served as the inspiration for the 2003 film open water. Their faces peer out gleefully from behind diving masks as a young couple watch sea life parade before them. Trailed by streams of bubbles from their aqua lungs, they explore the stunning reef before surfacing. This experience has left them excited and giddy. The boat, however, is not there. It has set off for the distant shore, leaving the couple stranded in the ocean. As several hours pass, their survival is beginning to look grim and grisly as the sharks close in. This is the story for Open Water, but overshadowing the harrowing images on the screen is the fact that the script is based on the true story of Tom and Eileen Lonergan, and as we know, the Lonergans were never found. In America, Open Water was highly acclaimed after previews at the Seattle and Sundance film festivals. It was billed as, quote, the Blair Witch Project meets Jaws.
Are you kidding me?
End quote. That's what it says. And with good reason. As with Blair Witch, a low-budget horror film that shook audiences with its lifelight, the almost documentary style of Open Water conveys a feeling of reality that has chilled reviewers. The use of a bobbin camera gives the audience a diverse view from the water and a graphic idea of how it would feel to be floating on apparently rough and gentle oceans, only to submerge momentarily and find yourself surrounded by ominous gray shapes. It is chillingly authentic, all the more so because the lead actors, who were relatively unknown, Blanchard Ryan and Daniel Travis, spent more than 120 hours in the water 50 kilometers off Barbados. There were all kinds of sea life, including real bull sharks and gray reef sharks, used in the scenes. Wearing chainmail under their wetsuits, the actors floated in the water, while shark experts and the filmmakers manipulated the shark co-stars' movements by throwing chunks of bloody tuna near the actors. That's how they got them to get close to the actors.
Let's just throw some chum around the actors.
For 120 hours. The film is undeniably gripping, but made all the more so by the controversy surrounding the fate of the Lonergans. Even today, many years after their disappearance, there's still debate over exactly how and why the two holidaying teachers, originally from Louisiana but lived in Fiji, came to find themselves adrift at a spot on the Great Barrier Reef known as Fish City. With that statement, it sounds like people are still very suspicious of these presumed deaths. I definitely see the point for both sides.
I just had a lot of thoughts about this. Did they know that they were making the movie about them?
Did who know?
When they made Open Water the movie, was it actually about the Lonergans?
It was about the Lonergans, yeah.
Okay. That was my first question. And the whole thing about the boats being more responsible, or I shouldn't say the boats, about Queensland being more responsible about their diving.
Mm-hmm.
You've been on those tours. I've been on those tours. And those forms that you have to fill out are astronomical.
I wouldn't know what they say because I never read them.
Let's have this discussion. But the amount of things that they need from the consumer, I just don't understand why it doesn't go both ways. Why it takes a tragedy for them to actually do their job.
Yeah. It sounds like it was a very unfortunate mistake. It really does. And there were a few things coming together to make this happen. It was the perfect storm for them being left behind, unfortunately. What I didn't like about this story was that everybody put their 2 cents in and try to blame the people that died. That's not okay in any way, shape, or form. I know that there were some dark entries in both of their journals, but like we said earlier, and like it was said actually in this episode from the resources I got, it makes no sense that they could have had everything come together perfectly for the mistakes to be made just right for them to fake their own deaths or commit suicide.
Mm-hmm.
That could not possibly have happened. It's too many things would have had to line up for that.
And then why is all of their stuff just all of a sudden over a period of time showing up?
The fact that their stuff is showing up is weird. So the fact that their stuff is showing up little by little is weird, and that none of it's being eaten by sharks.
There's
right?
there's no
animal eating damage. Okay. Mm-hmm. The fact that they had the weird entries in their journals, those things are feeding the theories, but all in all, there's no way, and I'm going to stand by saying there's no way anybody could have planned for that to happen. Both sides would have had to be working together, and there's no way. There'd be no reason for it.
I mean, you'd have to have the crew and the captain all in on this.
And the guests who said, 2 divers just went off and, they went swimming, and those are the 2 that are missing, because that was ultimately why they checked off 2 more. Mm-hmm. So the guests are involved, the crew is involved, and the Lonergans are involved. That makes no sense.
It doesn't.
So it's like, come on, you guys, those theories are junk. But it is a very interesting story with everything surrounding it, and even the stuff that they did to feed into it, even that their equipment is showing up and without any damage to it. Why were their wetsuits taken off? Like you said, wetsuits are really hard to take off. And in the movie, it's sad because, they're giving an idea of what could have happened. So in the movie, like first day, they're just shocked, there's not too much shark activity. But somewhere during the evening, they're getting bumped by sharks. And eventually the husband gets his leg bit by a shark. Uh-huh. And it's not killing him in that moment or anything. So she goes down, the wife goes down, and she wraps it in something. And then, they wake up the next day and they've drifted apart because they were holding on to each other at one point, but they've drifted apart. They have to find each other. They have to come back together. They're not drinking. They don't want to go anywhere because they're worried that the boat's going to come back and miss them. Mm-hmm. They know the boat's coming back. And if they go off somewhere, they may never be found.
Right.
So that's their logic in the movie. Don't go anywhere, stay put. So, I would guess a lot of people might feel that way. If we leave, they're never going to be able to find us, you know?
How far were they from the port?
I think I said it in the story. I think they were 25 miles.
So it was a significant amount.
It was a significant amount. They did see in the movie, I'm just talking about the movie now, they did see a couple of boats, but the boats didn't see them, and they didn't swim to the boats. Whether the boats were too far, whether they didn't want to leave their spot, that wasn't really made really clear. But so the next day, they drifted apart. They found each other. The husband had a bite mark. They're getting stung by jellyfish. Little things are happening in the ocean, right? Mm-hmm. Eventually, her husband, whether it's cold, whether it's the bite, they don't make that very clear either. He's asleep on her at one point, and then she realizes he's dead. And at this point, they've been being circled by sharks a lot more now. There's a lot of sharks in the water. And she's trying to fight them off, and the sharks are kind of bumping them and testing them out. I guess seeing what they are is what they're implying. And so she realizes that Tom's dead. I don't even think they're called Tom and Eileen in the movie. They're called something else. But she realizes her husband's dead. And so she's worn at this point. You can see she's also fading fast, but she was being strong for the 2 of them. And so she gets to a point, you see it in her eyes, where she just gives up. And she takes off his equipment, and she lets him float out into the water where the sharks are. And you see him float away a little ways, and the sharks start to come up and bring him down into the water. She watches it happen, and then you can see in her eyes again, she knows this is what's about to happen to her. So she takes off her own equipment. I don't know if she took her wetsuit off, but she takes off her own equipment, lets it all float away, and takes herself under the water. And that's how the movie, that part of the movie ends, with their deaths. Like she committed suicide because she couldn't take it anymore. So it was really sad. It's a really sad movie.
That right there is kind of implying of some of what was in the page. Not that it was planned.
Right.
But because of circumstances.
Right. And I thought the movie was good because it shows them fighting. It shows, well, you're the one that wanted to do this, and it wasn't my idea. Like a couple would do when you find out that, oh my gosh, we're in big trouble. This is your fault. They made it very realistic. Of course, it's not what happened. Nobody knows. But they made it very realistic, plausible as to what could have happened.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't far-fetched or anything.
Okay.
So it was an interesting movie.
It wasn't any of those asinine stories.
No, it wasn't any of that. It was legit. This might be what happened, and it's sad. It's really tragic to see them realizing that they're not getting out of the water.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it's a good movie. It's a good movie. It makes you think, and it's really tragic.
Wow.
So,
well, thank you very much for bringing that to us.
it's a tragic story.
It's a tragic story.
I feel like it's a story that needed to be told.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Take care, and don't forget to let your imaginations run wild.
Bye-bye. We just want to thank you all for sharing your time with us. And if you'd like to send in your creepy little grim bits, we would love to hear your personal stories, interests, and suggestions. Please email them to grimwitwithdimwits@gmail.com. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at grimwitwithdimwits, Twitter at grimwitwithdimwits, and Facebook, Grimwit with Dimwits. Join us every Monday for new episodes, and feel free to share us with your grim-loving friends.
We would really appreciate if you would take a minute to rate and review. 5-star ratings go a long way and would really help us out. Until then, we would love it if you'd come back next week to delve with us into the strange and unusual things we just can't wrap our skulls around.